fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren.
Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Today in the House of Mystery, our subject is true crime, serial killers in the Great White North. And perfect guest to tell us all about it. He's retired RCMP, homicide detective, and forensic coroner. He also served as a sniper on the British SAS. He's trained in emergency response teams. Excellent guest. His book, No Witnesses to Nothing, is his first novel in the crime thriller series. And he kind of crosses a little bit into the paranormal as well. He's also a very avid JFK assassination researcher, and he's got a website. It's dyingwords.net. Garry Rodgers, thank you very much for being on the show.
Hey, Al, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Let's start out with who you are. Kind of like give the listeners a little bit of a rundown on kind of your experience and what you've been doing with your life before you became an author.
Well, I've reinvented myself a few times. I'm on my third career right now. I started off as a Mountie, which is a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is Canada's federal police force. And during my time with the RCMP, I specialized in a couple of things. One was I went into the Serious Crimes Unit, criminal investigation, or basically the homicide squad, because that's what we spent all our time on, was investigating murders. And then I had a secondary specialty, and that's that I was seconded to the emergency response team, or what the U.S. refers to as SWAT, Special Weapons and Tactics. So that is not a full-time position. It's an additional 2 year as and when required. And I trained, I got some really good experience in training, and I specialized in being a sharpshooter or a marksman or a sniper. And so I spent a career with the RCMP, and that was 20 years, and most of it was on the west coast of Canada, in the Vancouver area. And the opportunity for the position of coroner for Vancouver Island, or Central Vancouver Island, came up, so I took an appointment as that, and because of my background in forensics, I took on an awful lot of the forensic cases, forensic death investigation. And then when I retired from that, my third time, I became a crime writer. It's something that I've had an aptitude over the years and a real enjoyment. So, and now I've been doing that several years full time, and I've had some reasonably good successes with that as well. So that's, in a nutshell, what I'm all about.
pretty amazing. What was it like being a homicide detective and dealing with killings and stuff firsthand? It must have been pretty, I don't know how to say it. It must have been kind of, you're dealing with kind of the worst part of what humans do.
Oh, some of it is really nasty. Some of the crime scenes that we've investigated and had to process are just, the average person, I don't think, can really imagine how gruesome they are. And you build up a stomach for it. I don't watch any of the CSI shows. I know that they're tremendously popular, but I've read quite a bit of crime books, true crime and fiction, and my take in it is a lot of them, the writers don't really get the facts right. They don't understand the processing. But then, of course, most murders are actually not that complicated to figure out. Most of them are smoking guns, and it's just a matter of picking up the pieces. And then you'll get some of the real puzzlers, which are, the whodunits. And I've got to say that I was involved investigating a few of them over the years that are still unsolved. And maybe one day, with advances in technology, that they will be.
And that must really stay with you then, right? Like when you get involved in a case and you're going through it and it totally goes cold, do you just forget about it, or does that kind of stick with you?
Oh, it's always there. It's in the back of your mind. And but again, new stuff coming in all the time. You learn not to dwell on it, and you try not to take the cases home with you. I've got a great quote from Joseph Wambaugh. Do you know who Joseph Wambaugh was? A crime writer from the United States, from Los Angeles area. He did Onion Field, Choir Boys, New Centurions, and that.
Oh, I don't know it.
He hasn't been writing for a few years, but he had the greatest line, and he said, It's not about how cops work on cases. It's how cases work on cops. That's where the real story is. And you have to remember that the police officers are human beings just like anybody else. And post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is very real, and it takes a number of them down. A lot of cops that have been around the violence over the years really are a bit of a train wreck in their own lives.
Oh, I bet, yeah. And like I said, and to be firsthand in this situation, there's a lot to deal with. So, do you find it to be kind of a better? I don't know if that's the right word, but it's a little bit better organized. Let's say in Canada with the true crime, the serial killers, and things like that, and the legal system, as we were talking earlier, as compared to the U.S., because it's not so publicized. It's like you don't see it on all the TV. You're not watching live trials going on.
Yeah, Canada doesn't prosecute by media. That's one thing I've got to say. We were off air. We were discussing the O.J. Simpson trial and what a fiasco that was. And thankfully, Canada doesn't allow cameras in the courtrooms. They allow reporters. Obviously, it's open to that, sketch artists, but there's no audio or visual recording live. So your prosecution and defense teams, as well as the witnesses, aren't going to appear on the 6 o'clock news, which is a disaster in my opinion. It throws the administration of justice into total disrepute. So we don't have that, and I don't believe we ever will. We've got a different legal system in the sense that we're bastarded by one piece of federal legislation called the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, to which all other laws bow before. And I think that the admissibility of evidence is much easier go in Canada. We don't have as much of the tendency to throw out a critical piece of evidence as a result of a technicality. Rather, we have what's a section called Bringing the Administration of Justice into Disrepute, which is a two-headed coin. And there's many rulings now that says that to exclude a piece of evidence based upon a minor technicality, the old I not crossed or dotted or the T crossed, that you would exclude it, and then it's fruit of the poison tree. We don't have that. So I believe that we've got a higher rate of being able to get facts in our courtrooms than what I'm aware of in the U.S.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that, and just for the listeners, how do the minors get treated? Because we had Bob Mitchell from Toronto, and he was talking about the bathtub girls. I guess they were two underage girls. I can't remember if they were 13 and 15 or something, or 14, 16, and they killed their mother in the bathtub. Give her a big pile of
I'm somewhat familiar with the case, not intricately, but I know which one you're talking about. Canada's law is that you become an adult at 19 under the criminal code, and which is a federal legislation, looks after all criminal law. It's like a penal code in each state, and it has got a waiver of responsibility at 12. At anything under 12 years old, you cannot be charged with a crime in Canada. That's an 11-year-old with 364 days to go if they were to kill somebody, they cannot be prosecuted for murder. So then there's a gray area getting up around 19, and that's what's referred to as a young offender between 12 and 19, can get raised to adult court depending upon their level of sophistication and their track record. So it's been known that kids as young as probably 16, I don't know about 15, but 16 have been raised to adult court, and then they're subject to the same punishment as adults are.
What brought you into becoming an author from doing this? Like, was there a certain case or a certain story that sort of drew you into writing? Well,
there was. My background is that I've written all my life because as a homicide detective or an investigator, you're doing a lot of writing. A great deal of the job is paperwork. And everything from investigation reports to search warrant and wiretap applications to forensic requests. And then I took on writing articles for peer journals. I just enjoy writing. And then as a coroner, I had to write legal judgments, the judgment as to what the official causes of death are. So you get good at technical writing. And then I had a story in me that happened, a true story that happened to me during the time that I was in the police force that I was burning to tell. And so once I retired from the coroner service, I took on the task of writing this. And I got a few months into it, and I realized that I knew nothing about the art of fiction. It's so different to write fiction than it is to write true crime. So I stopped, and I really took a number of courses, and I aligned with other successful authors, and I learned as much as I could about the craft. So I wrote a novel based upon actually 3 true crime stories, blended them together. And it did really quite well on Amazon. It went to number 5 in the horror occult thing. I was sandwiched between Stephen King at number 4 and Dean Koontz at number 6. So it's a bit of bragging rights from that.
Good company.
But, yeah, good company. Yeah, no, so I don't mind blowing my horn about that. And then it ran its course. And then I've written 2 more novels. I've written a true crimes book. I've written a number of guides on writing, and I've got another project that's on the go right now. So I've had quite a bit of writing experience now. And then I also, for the last 4 years, I've been handling my own blog site, and it's at the address for any of your listeners if you want to check it out is www.dyingwords.net. Dying Words is all one word. www.dyingwords.net. So every Saturday I put out a blog post, and it's usually crime-related, forensic-related, because I use the tagline to the blog site, provoking thoughts on life, death, and writing. And then last fall it got picked up by the Huffington Post, so I'm a regular blogging contributor. So every Saturday I put out a blog post on my website, and then the Huff runs it usually Monday, Tuesday, sometimes as late as Wednesday. So it gets really good coverage back. So my platform, as a result of crime writing, has grown to quite a bit. A lot of Twitter followers and people on the mailing list, and then it leads to opportunities like this to be interviewed by you, Val.
Your guides here now. What are the 8 separate guides about? Like 101 killer tips on thrillers. Like kind of what are your guides about for people? What are they going to get from it?
Well, these are the series of 8 on the what I call no BS guides are regard to crime fiction, and it's to take my knowledge that I've gained on this journey from learning how to write crime fiction, and I gathered the best tips that I could, and I've sourced out a number of people who are very prominent in the profession, anywhere from writers to publishers to editors to bloggers. And so I've taken the best tips and put those together for people to follow. And so far, I've had the one published on crime thrillers. And right before we started the interview here, I was just wrapping up on. My editor just sent me back the one on how to self-edit. That's a big one. There's a lot of information there. And I'm just about finished the draft on crime scenes, and then I'll have another one on crime characters, another one on crime dialogue, and then a few on forensics, one on autopsies, because I've got probably several thousand autopsies under my belt, and then another one on general forensics and one on firearms. So that's what those guides are about. They're short and sweet, and it's really is to somebody that's more into writing specifically for crime fiction, but writing goes across the board. It's tips on things that they might be able to improve their own craft. So it's giving back what I've learned from others.
And so, well, who else have been your inspirations, or who else do you sort of really like to read yourself?
Well, the guy that I think is a total master is Stephen King. Not everybody's a King fan, and I haven't read everything he's done, but I think the guy's brilliant when it's his ability to tell a story. Some of the lesser-known people, but who are really making a go on the indie circuit, is Joanna Penn from London, C.G. Lyons from the United States. there's a real up-and-comer coming out of Massachusetts, or sorry, out of New Hampshire, Sue Coletta. We've become quite good friends on the internet now. And then there's a number of really good crime writers showing up in Australia. So they're a little bit of all over. It's so easy to get to know other people in the business online, because all it takes is just a quick comment on their blog or an email to them. I find that people are, I've got a fairly good profile from my background, so right away they look and say, maybe this guy's got something we can learn from. So it's not hard to get introduced.
And so now on your book, now this is a real interesting subject. We have a lot of paranormal listeners, and we cover a lot of different subjects, strange and weird things. And now you're No Witnesses to Nothing, sorry, is the book.
Right, double negative. No witnesses.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's why I couldn't say it naturally. And so what's this about? Because I know the description is something like straight out of CSI or X-Files, and it's a paranormal intervention occurred. So how does that, wow, let's set that, let's talk about that.
No Witnesses to Nothing is based upon a true story, the primary storyline on an incident that happened to me in 1985. And it's a ghost story, but it's a true ghost story. And the title comes from, with a ghost, there's nothing to witness, so there's no witnesses to nothing. And you have to read the book to really see, several times in there, the lead characters use that phrase, and then it becomes, okay, now I understand why the book's called that. But the storyline is something that happened to me and to a group of my ERT, Emergency Response Team members, and to my partner and one of my best friends. During the 1970s and to the mid-1980s, there was a man by the name of Michael Eugene Orris. He had been roaming the north, living as a bushman, a wild man, through Alaska, the Yukon, and northwest British Columbia. He was actually a draft dodger from Kansas that made his way up at the end of the Vietnam War and just settled in the bush. And over the course of 13 years, he went into a spiral into absolute bush madness. And the unique thing about him was he kept diaries. These were found, so his thoughts were being recorded. He was well known by the First Nations people, which is the Indian, or the Tlingit is the name of the band, the peoples from that area of Canada and Alaska's north. And he was wanted for murder. He was known that he'd shot and killed another trapper. So no, this Orris wasn't a trapper. He was just a wild bushman living off of whatever he could get by hunting and killing or breaking into cabins and stealing food. And he had been arrested for a murder, and he was released on lack of evidence. And he vowed never to be taken alive again and disappeared. For 2 years he wasn't seen, until eventually he was caught inside a cabin by another so-called trapper, and they got into an altercation, and there was no shots fired, but they sent the police out, and the police from the local station were in a fixed-wing airplane, and this Orris opened fire on him with a British .303 rifle. So because he was well known and there was already a contingency plan for him. Now this is in March of 1985, and it's in still deep winter right on the British Columbia Yukon border in northern Canada. So we, as an emergency response team, I was one of 9 members on it, were tasked to go after him and locate him. And we caught him about 80 miles south of the nearest civilization on a lake, and we were dropped off in helicopters, and we tried to triangulate them and to box him in and order his surrender, and then be in a position to respond if he would open fire on us. So myself, my partner Mike Boudet, who also had a German Shepherd trained police dog, and a third member, were on a point of land with a noonday sun on our back. This is a clear but cool winter day, and this Orris is coming down the lake with a dog team. He's got a sled filled by two dogs, and he's in between a piece of wide open water, because the lake at that point is nothing but more of a widening of a river, so there's a current. So we thought we had him squeezed between there, and the other team was chasing him towards us, and 10 minutes or just before noon, he broke off from his dog team, and he got on a pair of snowshoes, and he took his rifle and he angled off towards us. Now he was about 500 yards out, and he went into the deep snow. It's chest deep snow, and it's in heavy timber, and he made it in under 10 minutes during that point of time, in that distance in under 10 minutes. And he circled myself, Mike Boudet with the dog, and the other member, and he snuck up behind us, and I was only able to see him at the last second, and I yelled to my partner, or radioed him, whatever, we were close together, he's right behind you. And with that, Horace let out a shot. He shot my partner in the back of the neck and killed him instantly. And then the weirdest thing happened. I've told the story many times, and I know there's a scientific explanation for this part, is that I went into a state of absolute hyper-awareness. I'm well trained and I'm a reasonably good shot, but it was like detaching from my body, and I was like watching this whole scene in slow motion, and frame by frame I'm like sitting on the branch of a tree above this whole thing, and I see this horse slowly working the bolt of his .303 rifle, although I can only see through a gray wash of brush. He was 44 yards from me, and I can just really only see his face, but I can see the motion through the brush of what his arms are doing. And he slowly reloads, and he points the rifle at me, and then I had an M16 5.56 carbine rifle, and I just I took a snapshot, and the next thing, horse disappeared, and I snapped back into my reality, into my body, and it was just a phenomenal experience. And again, I've told this many times. And so anyway, it took another 20 minutes before the other team came in. I just held a position there, didn't know what had happened to him, didn't know whether it hit him. So anyway, when the other team cautiously came in and they put an aircraft over top, they could spot him that Horace was laying dead in the snow. So, and of course my partner is also dead, and he's only 18 yards away from Horace. And when they opened, when they inspected Horace, my 223 or 5.56 bullet caught him right in the center of the forehead and killed him instantly. But when they opened the bolt on Horace's rifle, they determined there was a live cartridge in there. He'd already reloaded. He pointed the rifle at me, and he pulled the trigger, and the firing pin punctured his primer, and the round failed to go off, and my life was saved because of this. So, like, a lot of people say it puts hair, the hair in the back of their neck standing up when they hear that, but this goes on and becomes much stranger yet for the legend from the First Nations as to what took place. Still with me?
Wow. So, how did that change you? Well,
I was affected to some degree by PTSD after. It was, not to the greatest that it affects some people, but mine was probably more grief and shock than anything else. Putting your partner in a body bag, that's the toughest thing I've ever done. That's beyond description. But where I always wanted to find out what the truth was, what happened here. Now, where this gets into the macabre or the branching along with the paranormal is that the First Nations, the Tlingit people, knew of Horace, and they had actually warned the police that day from the police station where we took off. There was a elderly lady came into the police station and warned them that the Horace who we were going after, she did a vision, and that he was the manifestation of the Kushtaka, who is their mythical creature, the Wildman-Of-The-Woods. That's well known, and many First Nations have got this similar creature, Bukwas, and up there they call it the Kushtaka. No, this is a mythical shapeshifter, according to their storytelling, their legends, who will occupy a human body, and it thrives off the energy of other people. So its purpose, it's evil, it's deceitful, and it's deadly, and its purpose is to capture human souls, and that's what it provides. That's what it feeds its energy off. So in that story, if you look at it objectively from the First Nations, it served their people well, because it kept the individual from wandering away and going out in the bush and getting lost, and having others go and find them. Because the thing is, if you're out and alone, the Kushtaka will get you. So it was sort of a fear from mythology that kept people in line. However, the Kushtaka, as a mythical shapeshifter, is capable of doing things like this. It can travel in deep snow. It can approach, like, this horse made it by 18 yards away from a police dog and a very experienced police officer on snowshoes through heavy bush without being detected. And he snuck up behind us. Now, where it gets even weirder is that the area that we were in was where the old village of Teslin. This would happen on Teslin Lake in the Yukon. And when the Alaska Highway went through, they moved the village from where we were down at the narrows of the lake up to where the highway went through. So the remnants of the old village are still there, and up to pre-1940s, when the old village was there, they had a burial island, which is right across from where this took place. And this is not just myth, this is actual factual, that they had a very powerful shaman. His tribal name was Kashklau, who was buried in, they don't bury people under the ground in their customs, they put them in dent boxes and put them into rock pavilions. And on the burial island, there's a strategic spot where they enter it, and it faces north, and it's a very rocky beach, so this is a spot where you have to, if you're going to beach and go up and stay on the island, or enter the island to where the mortuary is, you have to come by this point. So because it was strategic, they buried their shaman on a particular location, which is the best lookout point. Now, what happened the night before we went to get to go after Oris, all this is recorded in tracks in the snow, and plus a spotter plane that was the surveillance plane that was watching him. He actually camped overnight right on that strategic point. So basically, he was camped right on the shaman's grave, right on Kashklau's grave. And of course, the legend of the natives is that this was so offensive to the shaman that the shaman, and they were in a spiritual battle between, it's a long-standing thing, the good with evil, the shaman and the Kushtaka battling it out for the powers of souls. And that their legend is that the shaman intervened to have Oris killed in his human manifestation by using me. So go figure, but that's what history has recorded. So,
well, when this happened, where were you in your mindset before this? Did you have any sort of belief in any of these, the First Nations ideas or even paranormal? Did you have any of that experiences before?
No, I never had any experiences, but I've always been, I've been a voracious reader, and I've always had some interest in it, wondering, okay, where do these stories come? What's the science behind it? I'm a big believer in science. And so no, I didn't have any real preconceived ideas, although I was very skeptical about ghosts and the paranormal, but I've sure heard a lot of stories from what I would say are, thoroughly normal, rational people that have had incidents that are beyond description, and mine's one of them. So I can't speak to the paranormal intervention from the shaman and the Kushtaka, but what I can speak to is my research into what happened to me to this so-called out-of-body experience. And this is partly what the book No Witnesses to Nothing makes an attempt to explain, what the science and the spirituality is behind the human soul. I think that we're all equipped as humans with an ability to go into a hyper state of awareness when we're under extreme danger or extreme duress. And there's no question that we've got a number of different levels of our consciousness. That we have our normal consciousness, like you and I are in at the moment, and we're having a normal conversation. And meanwhile, there's a subconscious going on within inside us that's causing us to breathe, and our circulatory system to work, and our repair system, our immunes, and all the other things that are in there. And then when we go to sleep, we go into another state of consciousness, and then you have two other states. One is a hyper consciousness, which is you're throwing into, and then there's a deep sense of being able to put yourself into an altered state of consciousness, is what the shamans over the years and some of the very trained people in, say, the monks in meditation, so they can put themselves into an altered state of consciousness in order to get information, wisdom, and creative suggestion and that. So mine was no different than the person that sees their light flash before their eyes. I was so traumatized when I realized this guy was behind us and got the drop that it was a natural human reaction, and I went into that state of I call it hyper awareness. It was like watching it from above, and that was how I was able to react to it. So that's my scientific explanation for it.
So has this made you change some of your views on paranormal after death and all that?
Oh, yeah. And then, see, this happened in 1985, so I carried on in the police force and for a number of years after that, another 13 years or something, and I took it a lot more to listening to people when they tell you things, and I've heard a number of stories. And then going into the coroner service, when I was really dealing with death, you're dealing with that every day, because I was an investigative field coroner. I'm out right at the death scenes, and then you have to interact with the families. And some of the stories you hear about people with premonitions and contact with the dead after, and these people aren't nuts. This is coming from somewhere, and so I'm cautiously siding with science, but I keep an open mind that there's far more going on out there than a lot of us understand. And I think that the state of human consciousness is probably the next big leap in advancements in our species. We're going to be able to learn to do more with our minds.
Oh, well, hopefully, but
yeah, hopefully. Well, there's some that they're hopeless, but
yeah, it's just not going to happen. But how was it in the police force afterwards? Like, did you talk to a lot of other people and tell them about this, or did you keep it quiet?
No, I kept it. I was held in a bit of a reverence. Like, I'm known as the guy who pulled off the amazing shot, and then of course, not too long after, I was called upon to do much the same thing in a different situation when there was no paranormal overtone. It was just a sad state of affairs. But members would come and talk to me. Some would be really cautious about me, but I didn't go blowing my horn about it. But if they wanted to talk, I would, because I think that therapy is probably the best thing you can do, is to talk things out and get other exposure rather than keeping it bottled up. And then other members that would go into, become involved in high-stress situations, we would have a debriefing team and counseling, and I offered my services based upon my experience to actually more go and listen to them as opposed to counsel them.
And so when you got into the coroner service, did you sort of ever have any experiences or feelings with the dead bodies?
No, nothing physical or metaphysical with it. Personally dealing with a dead body, I never had anything. A couple of times when you're alone in the morgue with them and they do some gassing off, it's a little freaky to hear a noise coming from a dead body, but that's a total physical response. You get used to that after a while.
Yeah.
But it still freaks you out.
Oh, I'm sure.
But no, I can't say that I've had any personal experience. The only one that I've had that defies explanation on was the Tisson Lake incident where I had this so-called out-of-body experience. Now, I believe that is scientifically explainable, but for the life of me, I can't explain how that guy was able to make it that quickly in that deepest snow in those conditions and come by my partner, who was very skilled and had a police dog, and without being seen or detected. And the First Nations say, well, it simply was the Kushtaka. He just shifted shape. He drifted right by you. Don't you know anything,
Yeah, weren't you paying attention?
Yeah, didn't you get the memo on the Kushtaka?
Yeah. Kushtaka, so what happens to it? So it's going around looking for souls, is that what you're saying?
That's what the mythology is. This thing is the personification of evil. So that's what it is. It's evil, deceitful, and deadly, and it steals souls for its energy. And it's able to live inside. How I wrote No Witnesses to Nothing is that I took the what if this First Nations account was real? What would the follow-up be? What would the story be? What would happen to the Kushtaka? And what would happen to the people that were involved in this? And so it goes dormant. It can live dormant inside for years until something sets it off, and then or its energy runs low, and then it has to go on a quest for more energy.
And I guess it would just live on forever. Well, unless it gets. So when you shot this guy, what happens to the Kushtaka?
Well, in this time, where it is in the book, the Kushtaka is laying low, and it actually it manifests itself in another police officer, and that's part of the story as to what's happening now. And this thing is after a particular member, to hunting them down, which is the thrill of the chase. That's the fictionalized part of part of the book. But it makes for a freaky story. I've had some really good comments about it. It's been well read, and it seems to do its job, and that's to what they call in fiction, you have to suspend the disbelief. So when you're into it, if it's your type of thing, because some people got right into it. That's the comment you can never get for your book, is when somebody goes, wow, I couldn't put that down. And then you know you've done your job.
Wow. And so now, are you continuing to write this sort of format now?
Well, I took the principal character in No Witnesses to Nothing, other than the members who were involved in the original shooting. It transforms into modern day, and it relates into a murder investigation that's based upon another true story, and that's two police informants that were murdered and their murders never been solved, and it's suspected they were drug informers. It's suspected that there might have been a rogue element of police officers that were involved in killing them because of the extreme MO. So I use a fictionalized protagonist who's a female RCMP officer who's part First Nations, because I really find that the First Nations culture and the spirituality very interesting, and it's something that really deserves to be shared with other people. So I use her as the protagonist, and she's investigating this murder and then gets caught up in this whole paranormal quest for souls. And so the book ends with a bit of a suspension in it. It explains what was behind the murders, which ties back into the paranormal, and then it leaves it wide open for a sequel. So I started writing the paranormal sequel to it, and then I've had some advice from other writers and an agent that I should stay away on the next one on the true paranormal, or make reference to it. So I wrote this one. It's called No Life Until Death, and it's on the black market human organ trafficking underworld. And it takes the same fictional police officer, and she's investigating the disappearance and then a found body. And again, I use the Vancouver, British Columbia area as a setting because I'm familiar with it, and it's widely known around the world from being an Olympic city. And unbeknownst to her, the group of targeters is targeting her daughter because of her rare blood type. So the manuscript is clean, polished, and is ready for publication. It's just now being shopped out for publication.
Wow. Is that sort of an issue still, in Canada or the U.S., as the trafficking of body parts and things like that?
Well, it's very real. There's no question about that. The amount of money that's involved in the underworld. Now, to say that they're being harvested in Vancouver might be a stretch. I use the Philippines because the Philippines is a very modern society in regards to its medical ability, but still a very black market, corrupt society. And there's a number of things go on where people do what's called it's like organ tourism for trafficking. Anyway, you can go to the Philippines and you can buy a kidney or whatever on the black market. You'll pay through the nose for it, but it's readily available. Wow. And then it gets into things like, for years until China was opening up, they were actually scheduling executions of prisoners based upon transplant demand. So they'd identify a transplant donor as a prisoner, and then when a recipient was identified, they'd arrange the execution of the prisoner in order to harvest the organ at the right time. That's not some myth or fiction. That's true.
Wow.
And then, of course, everybody knows about the urban legend of waking up in a bathtub with one kidney removed. Well, I don't know about that, but there certainly is a lot of people in let's say, India, Pakistan, throughout there that will willingly sell one of their kidneys.
And what are they getting for it? Is there a large amount of money?
Oh, yeah. On the black market, you can't touch a kidney under about $50,000, and it goes upwards from there, especially if you're getting to the rare blood types. I based mine. I did a lot of research into this, so it's not just I'm just grabbing these figures out of the air. So I used the figure of mine with the family that's trying to source the kidney. And the book No Life Until Death follows this California desperate family from California that turned to the black market, and they were going to pay $500,000 to save their daughter. In fact, the tagline of the book goes, "How far would you go to save your child?" So that stuff's going on.
Wow, I didn't realize it was so big. so I mean, I guess because the legal or the I was going to say the medical community can't really fill the demand.
Oh, the demand so far outweighs the supply. I don't have any of the figures right in front of me, but some of them, the World Health Organization did a study several years ago and indicated that the black market human organ trafficking around the world is somewhere in the $2 billion range, and it's escalating. And there's just within the United States alone, there's thousands of people on the waiting list for various organs, and the majority of them are going to die before they. Because it just isn't.
So we're talking probably the wealthier people that are able to buy more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's not something in a. Wow, and
well,
so I was going to say, is this going on everywhere? Like, so people from like North America, for instance, are buying parts through countries like Philippines and stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. But the prime ones are the Philippines is the number one. Then there's some of the other countries are India, Pakistan, Turkey is big. But the big market is the Philippines. The American influence in the Philippines, they're very modern. They've got a tremendously advanced medical system in the Philippines.
Yeah. Well, how do you know what you're getting is real? I guess you don't.
I guess like anything else in the black market, you go and buy a bag of pot, how do you know what you're getting?
Yeah.
It's I guess the luck of the draw. But with the way that I use the premise in No Life Until Death is that it was referral. See, Palo Alto, California has Stanford Medical Center. It's one of the largest transplant centers in North America. So these people were from there, and their daughter has got what's called AHES, is a very rare kidney disorder, which is going downhill fast, and she has a rare blood type, so she's almost impossible to get a replacement for. So she's referred from a urologist at Stanford Medical Center to another known colleague in the Philippines to arrange this black market. And that's not beyond the realm of possibility either.
Wow. I find that very interesting. It's not a. I don't think it's a good thing. I mean, I don't know. So when do you don't know when that book will be out, eh?
No, the manuscript is done, completed with its final edits and polished, and it's just now starting to shop it out for publication. I may just self-pub it myself because, quite frankly, some people are having so much results and success in doing the self-pub now that used to be a day when self-pub, was indie authors was, you can't get published by a real publisher, so you turn to that. But the days have changed, so I've got about 9 self-pub things out on the internet, on Amazon, which is the internet, which are, doing fairly well. And there's a little system on how to cheat Amazon's algorithms, and I've put a few up that have gone to number 1 in their category, but it's been on promoting them as free as opposed to selling them.
Yeah. I think the world's changing in that format. The like newspapers and books and all that. Everybody's reading them online or in their Kindle and their iPad and things like that.
Oh yeah, it really is. The print. I don't believe that print books are ever going to go away. I much prefer reading in print than on screen, but that's the way the world's going to, and so reading from not just on PC screens but down to tablets and smartphones. And that's what it is. So you've got, if you have a publication out, you have to have it available in digital format.
Oh yeah. I do a lot on that now. I mean, the cell phone's a little too small for me, for my eyes.
I'm with you on that.
But I can do.
I don't even like using the cell phone, to be honest with you. But
yeah, it's hard sometimes. My sight. But the iPad I can do.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean. Books are. It's nice to have the product in your hand.
There's just nothing like the paper. I'm just looking at my computer screen here right now, and I've got this newest guide that's going out onto Amazon on self-editing. And the nice thing about it is that I can just click buttons and put it away. I don't have to have to wait for a conventional publisher and then the change. I can integrate graphics with it now, and it's a really cool method of publishing. And then of course when you self-publish with print on demand with Amazon's CreateSpace or Instaspark or one of those, you can easily put out a print book on your own. That's no problem. But the one caution I've got to anybody that's putting out products on self-publishing, you've got to be really clean on your copy because the market's too sophisticated to put up with junk.
Yeah, and people have no problem letting their opinions be known.
Oh God, you get roasted so bad on out there on your reviews if you're not good, and then you've got no control on those at all. So you're putting yourself out to the world.
Well, even if it's good, you can get roasted. I mean,
oh sure,
it's not the same as the old world. It's a free for all sometimes.
Yeah.
Say you do the wrong thing, you know. Do you think is this a lot of serial killers still around right now, like in Canada?
Well, I've done a little bit of research into serial killers on my blog site. I've written a few blogs on them. Yeah, I think that there's probably, the statistics are there's around 300 of them of operation in North America at any given time. I can't say that I personally dealt with a serial killer. I dealt with a number of what we call mass killers, who've killed more than one person, but it's been in a particular event, not the true serial killer who's stalking and is methodical about it. But I certainly have worked on some homicides that have been caused by serial killers, and those monsters, that is a abnormality on its own, and it seems to always been around, and I don't think it's ever going to go away.
So what are the odds really of getting caught by a serial killer?
Oh, just astronomical. I did a blog post that a couple of years ago, and the title was how to avoid being murdered by a serial killer. So I actually worked out the statistics on it based upon facts and recorded homicides from the FBI or the RCMP's databanks, and you've got let's say there's around 450 million people in North America when you consider United States, Mexico, and Canada. And with 300 killers on the loose and the recorded number of homicides, that serial killers are only responsible for 0.01% of the known homicides, and the homicide rate, even in a prolific area, is 1 in 100,000. In a dangerous place. So you kind of do the math and go down from there. It's just sort of remotely improbable that you're going to be murdered by a serial killer, and really, the vast majority of victims, it comes down to them being a product of their environment. They put themselves in a high risk. The street sex trade workers, the people from certain classes of society, hitchhikers, that sort of thing. So they're vulnerable people to begin with. So
yeah. What's the most common serial killer? Is it, you think it's a male or a female?
Oh, male, I'm sure of it. I think female serial killers are really rare. There's only a couple that I know that come to mind, but compared to, I don't know what the percentage is, maybe 1 in 100. That's a long shot. And it would be female.
Yeah. Certainly hear more.
It's a male quirk. Males are much more violent in the species, whereas females are more crafty. If you're going to get murdered by a female, it's going to be well planned out, with the exception of the violent domestic things, and those are usually fueled by some sort of substance.
Yeah, it's pretty strange.
But the Black Widow is definitely a phenomenon.
Yeah. So who do you think? Who is the for you? Who is the biggest serial killer you know of for Canada?
Oh, it would be Robert Picton, Willie Picton in Vancouver, who I know a number of the members and the forensic people that dealt with that. If your listeners aren't aware of it, it's the case from Vancouver in the mid-2000s where Picton had lured, it's known, 49 different women from what's called the downtown east side of Vancouver. That's the drug and sex trade workers, back to his pig farm on a suburb of Vancouver. Then he would murder them, sexually abuse them. He was a necrophiliac, and then he would cut them up with a sawzall, with an electric sawzall, and then feed the remains to his pigs. The most prolific serial killer I think that Canada has had.
Oh, that's crazy. Whatever happened? He got caught, right? Yeah,
he got caught. Eventually, he got careless, as he put in his own thing, and They did a 2-year forensic grid search of the pig farm. Can you imagine going through pig manure for day after day after day on a small grid search, sifting it, looking for chips of bone and teeth? But eventually they found the DNA of 20-some women. And to Picton's admission, he confessed to an undercover cop. And he said he did 49. He was just waiting to do his 50th, but he got sloppy and got caught. So he's now doing life in prison, never to see the day again. But there's been a few others. There's an active serial killer, or killers, which is working in northern British Columbia. There's a famous case called the Highway of Tears. It's a stretch of a fairly remote road through northern British Columbia that, 30, 40, maybe even up to 50 women have gone missing, and some of the remains have been found over the years. I worked in a couple of those cases that are still unsolved.
Wow. And so that's been going on for quite a long time.
Yeah, that's been going on since the 70s.
So that's got to have more than one serial killer involved then.
I would say so, yeah.
That's a long time.
But it's not that many individual murders. There's somebody up there, some people up there who are doing more than one, for sure. The odds just have to be like that.
Do you think there's a reason behind that?
Well, some of these serial killers are, they're just psychopaths. Not psychotic in the sense they don't know what they're doing. But a lot of them are creatures of opportunity, and because they get away with it, they'll do it again. But those women up there, for the most part, are transients, and they've been disappearing while hitchhiking. So some of them, a number of them, are from the First Nations community, and they're addicted to drugs, alcohol, and their societal tendencies are that they'll just jump in a pickup with some stranger.
Wow.
I think that's what's going on.
Wow. It's not a good
thing. Those stranger-to-stranger ones, and crimes of opportunity, are so hard to solve.
Yeah, because there's no pattern to follow.
No, it's a random case of randomness, although there's certain MOs, but some of these people are, the killers are very sophisticated in their ability to get rid of remains. There's such wilds out there that the chances of finding a body, if it's well hidden, are very difficult. And to a T, very few serial killers ever confess to anybody out on the street, so they're almost always loners, and they're transient by nature. But a number of them, once they've been caught, have confessed. A good example of a serial killer who confessed was in Seattle, the Green River Killer, Garry Rodgers. Right. He did around 50 women in there too.
Yeah.
And the only reason he got caught in DNA eventually, and the only reason he confessed was to avoid the death penalty. In his words, he said he was absolutely terrified of dying himself. He'd seen too many other people do it.
Wow. This, and I guess they'll just keep on coming.
Yeah. They just in the northern British Columbia community, within the past 2 years, they just nipped a serial killer in the bud after 3 of them. He would have kept on going. That guy would never have stopped. And again, he got a little sloppy and was picked up by a forest ranger who saw him down a road in a snowy time that was out of place, and followed his tracks back and went and checked, and he still was the tracks in the snow, and he found the body. And he recorded the plate number, so they nailed that guy.
Wow.
So how many of these serial killers are actually caught, just when they first started, before they get really sophisticated? Who knows?
Yeah, it's one of those things. Well, it's certainly been interesting. How do people get a hold of you, and give out your information?
Yeah, okay. Well, it's, Garry Rodgers it's 2 R's in Gary and a D in Rodgers, the Irish spelling of Rodgers. And my website is www.dyingwords.net. Dying Words is one word, .net. And so that's on the website. There's lots of information on there about forensics and links for other writers, and I've got about 140 blog posts up now that I put up over time. So there's some kind of cool stuff. So I go with the tagline, provoking thoughts on life, death, and writing. So I kind of cover the 3 ends of those, and I'm not beyond trying to stir up a bit of controversy. And I'm on Twitter, very, very active on Twitter, and it's at the @ Garry Rodgers, and then the numeral 1, Garry Rodgers 1. And then my email, if anybody wants to get a hold of me, is well available either on the website or Twitter. And I've got a Facebook site too, but I'm not as much on social media as some of the other other writers are. I spent my time trying to produce content as opposed to playing around.
Oh, yeah. It can take a lot of your time. So, well, it's been an interesting hour. Thank you very much for taking some time and talking with us.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you all. The mission has been completed.
The end! By George, he's got it! It is the end! I'll say it.
This has been a production of the Z-Talk Radio Network.
If you're lying to me, I'll be back.